Thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate you and appreciate your interest in this incredible topic. And I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Patricia Mills. I'm a medical doctor, specialist in physical medicine rehabilitation. I'm also a functional medicine practitioner and a health transformation expert. And I am so honored and so privileged to be presenting today with the lovely Natasha Samson, who is a certified yoga and Ayurveda teacher.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. I'm so excited to be here as well. Ayurveda is my life love. So any chance I get to really talk about this beautiful gift with anyone else to help share this knowledge to make people, feel and look better, I'm just so stoked to be part of this as well. So really looking forward to it.
Oh, me too. Me too. And I just wanted to take an opportunity to reflect on how important it is that we are all meeting in the same room, so to speak, to share this wisdom with you, because this is really important in this modern day and age, for sure. So, wisdom for women, what is this all about? We have gotten to the point now where we have the benefit, we're so privileged to have the benefit of um, thousands of years of knowledge from ancient medical systems like Ayurveda, which we're going to be diving deep into today, as well as from cutting edge science, right? So, and what's really neat is that there's definitely research from very, very high quality institutions, universities typically, because pharmaceutical companies are not going to be the one doing this research. It's usually institutions that are funded through the public and through donations and through the government that are looking into this kind of research. And for example, with Ayurveda. And there's certainly an intersection where that ancient knowledge from Ayurveda is intersecting with the cutting edge science. And that's where we're focusing in on today, is that intersection, so that you can rest assured that the knowledge that you're getting here is vetted by science. It's either going to be vetted by some kind of physiological science, like how the body works, like our understanding of that, all the way through to things like randomized control trials, which is the new paradigm of vetting, information, is taking different groups of people, randomizing them, and giving them one thing and not the other group not, and seeing how they do differently. So this is really powerful information. And remember that no matter what stage of life that you're in, whether it's something that's relevant to you or a family friend, a family or a friend, you can always take this knowledge and apply it. And you'd be surprised in what areas of your life this will become relevant.
A big thing also when we talk about Ayurveda and we start to share this knowledge with people, they think to themselves like, oh wow, this makes so much sense. Like this is so logical. I really get that because really, we have this innate, deep, like foundational and almost primal knowledge within us that is just kind of hidden or forgotten with our distractions of the day. And so, what's really beautiful about bringing these two sort of um, branches together is that we can show you that the things that we kind of know innately and know that are good for us, and if we listen to our intuition, that this is actually backed by modern science. And so it's really exciting to bring these together to get that sort of realization as we move forward.
So true, Natasha. I love that.
So we're just going to start with a little bit of history on what Ayurveda is. And so some folks, they try to learn about this on their own, and they've heard the word, or they heard this word dosha and little bits here and there, and they know that it's ancient, they know that there's wisdom associated with it, but it can be a little bit hard to access, and searching on the internet can sometimes be a little bit daunting or frustrating because it doesn't necessarily seem clear. And so what we plan to do by the end of the session today is make this very clear for you, that you can go home today and implement these fundamental things today so that you can start feeling better tomorrow. So we're really excited to really make this amazing science very like reachable and accessible for you today. So we're going to start with just a little basic history. So the word Ayurveda is a Sanskrit word, and it breaks down into two words, Ayur and Veda. And so the words are broken down to life, Ayur meaning life, and into knowledge, Veda meaning knowledge or science. And so when you really put these two words together, Ayurveda brings us the knowledge of life. So it reaches out to all aspects of life, not only our manifested sort of physical body, but also our mind, our environment, and everything around us, a real holistic approach to our life and understanding life and bringing that into awareness so that we can have a healthy and happy life. So this ancient science is more than 5,000 years old, and it really emphasizes like good health and prevention. And we go through treatment through lifestyle, which means our diet, our environment, our exercise, yoga, meditation. Yoga is our sister science to Ayurveda. We talk about massage and even go into herbs and natural remedies and even more advanced sort of remedies and surgeries and applications as well. But we're going to stick to the basics today. So we're looking at a science that has had thousands and thousands of years of observation, and it was provided by generation to generation. It started over 5,000 years ago, and it was only written down closer to 3,000 years ago. So it's pretty amazing that this information was able to be passed on for so long and then finally written down. And so what I have here is just this sort of timeline and process of how Ayurveda just brings this fundamental knowledge to us. And so these Rig Vedas are these ancient texts of knowledge, and they span from not only health and wellness of the body, but the stars and architecture and so much more. And this dialed sort of information was almost downloaded to these ancient sort of seers who were in deep meditation. Which may sound a little funny, but if you are on the path of yoga and meditation, you've come across this idea before. The knowledge was written down into these different philosophies, Samkhya philosophy being a philosophy of numbers and calculation. And this is a bit of a chart that shows us how consciousness or universal consciousness has been manifested into what we know as matter today. And as you look at our connection to the divine or universal consciousness and how that really comes from this sort of outreach sort of concept to physical manifestation is this Samkhya philosophy. And we're not going to go into depth in it today, but what we do need to know is as we go from something that's difficult to understand and grasp and see physically to our physical world, we start with what is called the 5 elements. And there's a 5-element theory. So we break everything down into these Pancha Mahabhutas, which is called in Sanskrit. So Pancha meaning 5, Maha meaning grand, and Bhutas meaning elements. So with this 5-elemental theory, if you look at anything like a cell or an atom, we've got the 5 elements. We're talking about earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So even if we look at a cell, we've got the structure of the cell, we've got the vibration, the heat, or even an element that the bonds, the molecular bonds have the structure and heat that brings them together and movement. And so you can really see how the elements are within any sort of aspect of life. And so when we take it all the way down to looking at everything with our sort of Ayurveda goggles on, we really start with the 5 elements. And we're going to get really deep into that over the next little while to really show you, by looking at the elements, we can really translate that out to so much that's happening in our life, outside and inside, that's coming in. Another big thing about Ayurveda that might be a little bit different than what we're used to is that it really cares about the root cause. So often we go to a professional with a symptom. Can't sleep, I have indigestion, etc. And so Ayurveda is not so much about here is your solution for your symptom. It's really about digging down deep to find out what caused the original symptom in the first place. And that can be anything from what you're eating to, wanting to have a level of control in your life because of a situation that's happening. And we don't know which one that is without asking more questions and really digging down deep. And that's a beautiful thing about it, is that it's not a quick, fast, easy sort of solution, because when you do find the root cause, that's when you can really make changes.
I think that's really beautiful because the link with Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, one of them, first of all, they have also the elemental theory. They also have their elements. And they also do root cause and functional medicine. What I love about functional medicine, which is now my major passion in terms of the medical approach, is that it also is root cause medicine. So you see that there's these commonalities amongst these traditions. And the closest thing I've ever come across to this kind of approach to health in the Western medicine culture is functional medicine, which is why Ayurveda was just so fascinating to me. And I love to see the parallels that come up when I'm doing my functional medicine training and learning with Natasha and seeing the research on it, how the two kind of really intersect. It's really quite cool.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. When Patricia and I get together, we're just like talking and getting so excited about the parallels. And it is exciting to know that that this can really be proved by modern functional medicine. So moving on to like, what is health? When we're talking about Ayurveda, Ayurveda actually has this definition of health. And in the West, it's sort of been accumulating towards this full, I feel, a full holistic definition. And in Ayurveda, many, many, many years ago, they've decided that you need all of these elements really in line to feel and look your best and feel like a healthy, happy person. And so they break it down to these couple of aspects. So the 3 fundamental humors of the body, which we'll learn about, making sure that our digestion, absorption, and elimination is working efficiently. And that's not just what we eat, that's also everything that we're digesting from our different sense organs. So are we digesting what we eat, what we see, what we hear, what we're touching? And so if we can have efficient digestion of everything that's coming in, then that's really part of promoting a nice and healthy sort of mind and body. Now, with the digestion, we also need proper elimination of all of the waste that's being taken out. So that's part of it. And we have waste through our feces, our sweat, our urine, there's our crying. There's lots of ways that we actually like release these toxins as well. And in addition to what comes in and what goes out, that stuff that happens in between is the nourishing of all of our bodily tissues. And that will affect our mind as well. And because our mind and our digestion and how we are actually nourishing all the tissues in our body is going to have an effect on the mind. And so we talk about having our sense organs and our motor organs, as well as our mind, in a happy state. So all of this is included in the definition of a healthy person, because it is mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah, I love that. It's like the saying, you are what you eat, absorb, assimilate, and don't eliminate, for better or for worse. And you can have mental indigestion as well, which is very important in this day and age.
Absolutely. All right, so enough with the history. We're going to get right into getting you to understand the fundamentals of Ayurveda so that you can apply it today. So we talked about that sort of manifestation of consciousness into matter, and we start with the 5 elements. So here we have the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. I start at the bottom because it's a little bit easier to understand the aspects and the fundamentals when we talk about something substantial that we really understand. So I'm going to start with the earth element. And what I like to do is just take a moment and think about qualities of the earth element. So some qualities of the earth element are going to be heavy, dense, cool. What are some of the qualities that you might associate with the earth, like an earth element? So if you continue on with that sort of grounding, heavy, stable, sort of unmovable, qualities that the earth element can provide, can you think about how these qualities could also be found in a personality trait? Someone who might be grounded or stable, have this like good memory, those people that are just, you come and see them and that you can like exhale, those like mama bears, those folks.
Very nurturing people.
Absolutely. So that nurturing aspect. Can you think of maybe some foods that would have the qualities of heavy, dense, thick?
I'm thinking sweet potato.
Absolutely. So our root vegetables, root vegetable stew, like let's just add more like thickness and oil to that, our oatmeal, those kinds of heavy, dense, thick, oily foods are also associated with the earth element. Let's take it up to another aspect of our life. So what about exercises? Can you think of some exercises that might have those qualities of stability and heavy and sort of, strength building?
Weightlifting.
Yeah, absolutely. So our kinesthetics, our weightlifting, all of those kinds of those exercises that are going to build that strength, that steadiness in the body. What about habits? Are there habits that might be heavy and dense and thick and cool?
Oh, that's a harder one, I feel like.
This is the one that I really love. So some sort of habits on the lazy side would be being sedentary and heavy and dense, maybe binge watching our TV shows, but also at the same time, all of those folks that are able to sit and enter data, and folks that can really, focus on a task, or those who are using their strength to build, and to dig, and our farmers and our construction workers, these folks that have that stability and endurance to be doing this hard, tough work all day. What about some maybe imbalances that could be associated with the heavy, dense, thick sort of qualities?
I'm thinking, like you mentioned, unmovable, so really stubborn.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Controlling, maybe.
It can be, rather than controlling, on the same line as stubborn, we would be like, unmovable, having a difficult time, like, changing their mind or accepting something new. Yeah, but also, nurturing. It could be that heavy, dense depression, could be an imbalance that would come with that earth element. But also, like we were saying before, sort of a nurturing and loving and, forgiving sort of, maybe we'll see some qualities. But what about physically in the body? Can we think of heavy, dense, cooler physical imbalances that we might have?
Cancer comes to mind as something that's really heavy and dense.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking, at a weight gain, maybe lethargy, some cancer, that heavy sort of dense, like, in the lungs that can happen. So what I'm getting at is that if we really put on these like Ayurveda goggles and look at everything when it comes to the elements, we can start seeing the elements in all aspects of our life.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll move up to the water element, again, with the same sort of idea. What are some qualities of the water element?
I think of like flowing, going with the flow.
Absolutely. So someone who might be more yielding, someone who can go with the flow, someone who is okay with changing plans. Some foods that would be associated with these qualities of maybe cooler and mobile, liquid sort of qualities would be our soups and our fruits and vegetables that have a lot of water content, like a cucumber or a grape, as an example. Some lifestyle choices or habits might be those who like to move around or people who like to have different things happening in their day. So sometimes these like team leaders or teachers can have a lot of this earth and water element in them because they're grounded and nurturing and offering, but they can also kind of change gears and deal with like the questions that are coming from the students and going in different directions. Yeah. And then also with our nursing staff, right? These people who take care of us, they have to have these earth and water qualities to not only nurture, but also like on a dime, like know how to like change and go with this new sort of program based on what's happening in front of them. So some imbalances that could be associated with the water element would be, actually retaining water.
Like the lymphatic system, getting like swelling of the tissues with backup of things like the lymphatic system or inability of the kidneys to clear
Absolutely.
water.
Perfect. So moving on up to the fire element, what are some qualities of the fire element?
Like vivacious, like sharp,
Absolutely.
bright,
Hot.
hot.
Yeah. So a hot, sharp, light, sort of spreading, right? Fire spreads. So can you think of some fire traits that would be in the personality? So a person that would have, a fiery personality, maybe sharp. This is where the controlling would come in. Temper, yeah, I'm seeing temper. So I'm seeing a lot of this hot, sharp, but also very passionate. They make great leaders. Exactly. Yeah, love it. Thanks, Jen. Amazing. Yeah, bold. They're the ones that are standing in front, right? And they're fine to stand in front because they have that like fire in them to make change. So often they are our leaders. They are the people in front of the army. They are the ones making change. So the fire element isn't only bad and associated with, jealousy and anger and frustration and controlling. We need a lot of fire in our personality as well to actually get our stuff done. So what about some foods that would have these qualities of hot and sharp?
Like spicy foods.
Yeah, absolutely. Our pungent foods and our salty foods and our sour foods, right? You can
a sauerkraut.
Right? You can, when I start saying those tastes, you're like, yes, I can feel the heat, right? Makes so much sense. Yeah, absolutely. And so when we have these like, spicy Mexican food and we have the alcohol that's been fermented and we're sitting in the sun in the patio, And then we end up picking a fight with our husband later that day and we don't know why. That might be what's going on.
Aha, now I get it. My fire element was elevated.
Yeah, it's not really your fault. That's why, in the Mexican restaurants, they have all of the lime and like the cooling sort of little additives and that they add so that you can help balance your meal a bit more.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, really fun. Okay, so what about some habits or life choices if you've got a lot of fire elements? We talked about leadership. What else would there be?
I guess speaking your mind.
For sure. Other ways that the fire element shows up in our habits would be, in sports. So if you look at any, competition, right? So if we look at any athlete, those athletes tend to like go, go, go and burn bright and then burn out, just like a fire does, right? And so putting all of this extra fire and trying to accomplish 110 things, or, having a fire element person often has these unrealistic expectations of themselves and others, and reality is down here. And in between is a lot of pain. And so that is the kind of crutch of a fire element person, is that, what is actually realistic, because they want to go and they want to prove. And really it has a lot to do about feeling loved. And so the fire element needs that love and compassion for themselves and others. Yeah, I love this. Enthusiastic, competitive, fierce, perfect. Right. And so what about some imbalances that might be associated with the fire element?
Oh, for me, I like rashes, like that fiery red rash that can come
Absolutely.
up.
And it spreads, right? The fire
Yes.
spreads, the rash spreads.
And then whole body inflammation.
Anything with an itis, actually, it has that inflammation associated with it. So if you find yourself or someone with that itis, take a think about, well, what is the foods they're eating? Do they have lots of sour and pungent and salty foods? Are they really competitive? Do they have unrealistic expectations? Are they go, go, go? What are some other places where you're seeing the fire element in their life holistically that might be manifesting as this fire imbalance? So, yeah.
I'm just laughing because I feel like that's me. I'm always trying to balance that fire.
Yeah, absolutely. So your fire babies in your life, you can like give them like a cookie or maybe some cucumber water or those kinds of things. So all of that heat, the acne and the rashes and the itises, and those might be associated with some excess fire that needs to get out. So the air element, we're going to move on. We're getting a bit lighter as we go up the chain here. So what are some qualities of the air element?
I think like mobile, like moving around, like not staying one place.
Absolutely. Fun, happy, love it. Lightness. Yeah, so some qualities of the air element are going to be light and mobile, like we talked about. And air is dry, right? The only way air is moist is if there's water in it. So air is very dry. That's one of the main qualities of the air element. So dry, light, and mobile. So just like all the other elements, we can look on the really upside of those three, and we can look at the downside of those three. So the upside of those mobile and dry and light qualities are fun, laughs easily. I love that. Creative, and like this sort of like idea of like bringing things together and creating projects, or like traveling the world, or making music and art and design and all of those wonderful things. On the downside of the light and mobile can be anxiousness, can be forgetfulness, starting a project and having all of this like yes, let's do this, and then no follow through, and then start a new project because they've gotten, they're over it. So they're just on to the new project. So like our air babies really need to match themselves up with a fire baby to like get the work done, and then an earth baby to just make sure that someone's actually getting the work done. So we've got our three major components of our project for success. Yeah. Okay. So what about some habits that would be associated with the qualities of the air element?
A habit. I'm thinking of distractible, but that's not a habit.
Well, it can be for sure. You can definitely
Okay.
have a distracted mind, and habitually give yourself too many things to be doing at once,
Ah,
right? And
interesting.
that can be a habit. Traveling.
You mentioned music,
Mhm.
creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, yeah, dance, art, all of those things. What about some foods that would be associated with the light, dry, and mobile?
I'm thinking raw vegetables, like
Ah, that's right.
salads.
Mm-hmm. Salads, raw, popcorn, or rice cakes, or any like granola, anything dry and crunchy and rough, basically.
Like
Yes,
dried seaweed.
depending on how you find it. Yeah, anything that we're dehydrating, like when we have kale chips as an example, there's a lot of air element there as well. And cold, right? So anything that's going to be raw and cold, so like our iced drinks. So if you see the folks that might be in a raw vegan restaurant with their raw, crunchy, dry foods and their cold iced drink in the wintertime, it's very likely that that person has also the composition of a Vata person, and has that like creativity aspect of them, or might be a musician, or an artist, and all of those things. You can just visualize them, and they probably are tall and lean, and like have these like eccentric things about them that really that are also qualities of the air element. It just kind of all comes together in this beautiful package.
Interesting. And I guess if you have too much of it, that's when you get the air imbalances.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to get to that later. So I want to talk about those air imbalances before we move on, but our physical imbalances. So what could possibly be some manifestations physically that we would see from the qualities of dry and mobile and light?
Hmm. I'm thinking of, oh yeah, dry skin. Good
Mhm.
one for
Yeah,
sure. Rough, dry skin. And I'm thinking the brain shrinking, like more space in the skull, like the brain kind of shrinks down, it loses its moisture, so it's just more air.
yeah, absolutely. So what would be some imbalances associated with that? Like what would that manifest as?
Dementia
Mhm.
or Alzheimer's.
Absolutely. And even like air in the bone, right? Our osteoporosis, we actually have pockets of air.
Right.
We're seeing air in these different imbalances. So it's not only our constipation, our dry skin, or dry lips, or those kinds of things. It actually is found in more of these more intense sort of imbalances as well. So I'm hoping that you're starting to put together this picture of looking at maybe what you might be feeling, whether it's anxiety or frustration or depression, or if you're having these imbalances of constipation, or inflammation, or lethargy, or with the earth element, congestion, lymphatic congestion, weight gain, those kinds of things. You're seeing that those qualities are associated with an element, and then maybe you can match those qualities with other things in your life, your food choices, your diet, your habits, your type of work, those kinds of things. Wow, I'm so glad we're seeing the parallels. And so what do we do about it? What we do in Ayurveda is we try to break down what's in front of us, understand what elements are at play because of its qualities, and then do the opposite to pacify. Like increases like, and opposites pacify.
And I'm really interested to see what ether and space is, because I feel like that's not a very well understood element. Like, you know what I mean? I'm very intrigued by this element, because I can already see, like, I have a little bit of everything, but I'm definitely dominant in fire and air.
Mm-hmm.
But ether and space, I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, so ether and space, it's very similar to air. It's like up another level, so it still has a lot of the same sort of qualities as the air element would have, because that ether and the space is like the space in between. So even when we're looking at a cell or we're looking at an atom, there's still that undescribable like inner space, right? It's that level of, and the reason why it's actually matched with space as well, ether as space, because there is that connection. There is that connection to the planets, the stars. There's that connection that we have outerwards and innerwards. So it is a more difficult one to kind of grasp, but it does have a lot to do with birthing the other elements, right? It's the beginning, it's the foundation. And on an energetic level, because when we look in Ayurveda, ether births air, which births fire, then water, then earth.
So, you know what's really fascinating about that? I mean, if you do study like astrology and the science of the cosmos, there is ether, in the sense that when you leave the stratosphere, you get out of air and then you get into something. It's not nothing, you know. There's something there, and they've even given names to it, like dark matter. You know, so it's not light. It's present in the absence of light, and it's present in the absence of air, fire, water, and earth. So it's that thing. And it's really quite fascinating, because as we talk about like quantum physics, and we talk about, as you say, atoms, and like the energy inside atoms, and how we are made of like tiny, tiny little atoms, right? And like there's enough energy in that atom that if you were to release it, it would destroy the world. And you are literally walking around with that energy, like trillions of those atoms in your body. Like, you are that walking bundle of incredible energy. And a portion of that, they're starting to understand, comes from this like undefinable matter called ether, and it's within us and without us. So as within, so without; as above, so below. So I'm just fascinated by this concept of that being an element that Ayurveda recognized way back then. You know, like, I don't even this download that these meditating people got, being so in the presence of now, so tuned into the present, that they were able to, like, I'm thinking, connect to the source that has all of this information down there. And we all have the capacity to connect to it. I sometimes get a glimpse of it when I'm meditating, but nowhere near you would need to get that kind of a connection. And it sounds like this ether and space is kind of like the mediums, a part of the medium of that information that exists through the fabric of the universe.
Yeah, you got it.
Whew.
It's wonderful, right? So coming back to our definition of health, because what we're here to do is transform our health. And so understanding these fundamentals, and we talked about the definition of health, and we said that we really need balance of these three humors in the body. And the three humors in Ayurveda are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha.
And sorry, Natasha, ether and space, can you give us some ideas as to the qualities, briefly? Are there like qualities in foods and habits and that kind of thing for that? Or is it like just this overarching element,
Yeah, I would say that we are going to look at it more like an overarching element for now. It is, I don't know if esoteric is the right word to use, but it is a bit like difficult to really like articulate. It does have those light qualities, and it's more of sort of what we say in Ayurveda, like a sattvic sort of idea, where there's the qualities calm is associated with it, and lightness and presence and peace of mind, and those kinds of qualities. So we're getting like at a almost subtler level. So even like the quality of subtle is associated with the ether element. And if we were to look at things that are subtle, it would be like smoke. Smoke has a subtle quality to it. So things that you can't necessarily see, but you might be bringing in to the mind and body. Is that
Interesting.
helpful? Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So coming back to the three humors of the body, Ayurveda breaks them up into three, and they're really a combination of these elements that are in front of us. So the three major humors in Ayurveda are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So ether and air combine together in the body, and they create what's called Vata dosha. The word dosha means that which gets out of balance. A lot of people say like, oh, I'm Pitta dosha, and it's a bit of a misbranding of the word, because dosha is that which gets out of balance. And so what you're trying to say is, I have a Pitta like constitution, and in Ayurveda it's called your prakriti. Which is, determined at the time of conception. So it's really kind of linked to what we would call our DNA, our constitution. And so these humors, that which gets out of balance, are found in the body. Our fire and water combine together to make Pitta dosha, and our water and earth combine together to make Kapha dosha. And so these three doshas manifest in the body physically as well. So Vata as air, our Pitta as our ability to transform our food into nutrients, what we're seeing into information. So that transformation sort of ability is Pitta dosha at play. And it's associated with the bile in the digestive tract. And then our Kapha is associated with the mucus and phlegm. So basically everything from the mouth to the fundus of the stomach, where it's all like wet and moisture and all of that's happening there. It's also associated with the lungs and the heart and basically the chest mostly.
That's very interesting because like you could do like the dosha questionnaire, which is a very common questionnaire, right? And there's the constitution that you were born with. So you got your genetic kind of makeup, and so and maybe when you're born, you're as well balanced as you're going to be, or maybe not. Some kids are born with imbalances and then they have to fix it. But let's say if you were born true to your DNA, you would have this constitution, that your predominant constitution, or one or two or combination. But then you can become imbalanced. So when you go to do that questionnaire, when you're like in your 20s or 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you can actually get different results. And it's not so much that that's the constitution that you were born with, that's not your DNA. It's more like what's happening environmentally to imbalance the dosha, right? To create that imbalanced dosha. And now you can get a very different kind of answers in your questionnaire that is simply a reflection of how you are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of fun to play with the questionnaire. It's a tool, and it's a playful tool as well. To really know what your constitution is, an Ayurvedic practitioner can tell by reading your pulse, as an example. But these questionnaires are like step one, and lots of questions would be asked in a consultation to really narrow down what your constitution is, which is at the time of conception. Because remember, we don't have control over what our mamas are doing while we are in the womb, right? And so if they are out of balance and they have this like spicy tooth, and they are getting their nachos and salsa, several nights a week while they have you, then you might come out with a pitta imbalance. You might come out with a fire imbalance at birth, right? So the constitution is really at conception, and so much can happen right after that. So, yeah, and so when we're looking at the questionnaire, if you want to really try to figure out what your constitution might be, you want to think of a time in your life when you felt most balanced. So if that is at 20, or if that is at 19 or 14 or 30, whatever time that you felt like you were in your flow and you felt the most healthy, that would be when you would want to answer the questionnaire for what your constitution may be. And then you could also redo the questionnaire again for how you feel today. And how you feel today in Ayurveda is called the Vikruti, or how the doshas are themselves today.
Ah, cool.
Great. So we've got our three doshas here, and I wanted to just kind of elevate these qualities, right? So our Vata has the dry, cool, and light quality. And our Pitta shares the quality of light with Vata. So they're light and hot and moist, or oily. And Pitta shares, because of the water, that oily or moist quality with Kapha, with that moist, heavy, and cool. And both air and earth are cool. So they share that quality as well. So I wanted to show this because they're not completely separate. They're not mutually exclusive. They share some of the qualities. And so you need to look at both depending on what you see in the imbalance. So as a summary, when we're looking at our Vata dosha, and I like to start with Vata for this particular session because we are in the fall. And if you think about our environment right now, what are the qualities of our environment? Our qualities in the environment in the fall are dry, the leaves are drying and falling, the wind is blowing. We have those mobile, dry, and light qualities. So Vata time of year is the fall. And that's where we're in right now. And during this time of year, if we are still eating our crunchy, delicious, dry salads and our raw fruit vegetables, and we're still buying watermelon from the store, then we're going to start to aggravate and add more Vata in the body because our environment is Vata and we didn't change our types of food yet. And so we're just going to start to accumulate Vata in the body if we don't make those changes, which is what we're going to talk a lot about today. So
yeah, I find that really fascinating actually, because I used to keep eating my salads year round. I'm like, salads are so healthy. I should just eat my salad all the time. And now I had dry skin and, now I'm thinking, oh,
yeah, exactly. And
no.
similar here, Patricia, because I do focus on healthy eating, a lot of people assume I eat salads all year round. And every time, every time I'm in the middle of the winter, I'm like, nope, thank you. I want all of my vegetables cooked, please.
Totally.
Yeah. So just to summarize our Vata dosha, so our qualities, we were talking about, the light and dry and cool. And we've got our creative people, enthusiastic, moving, also can be very scattered, anxious, forgetful, but also we were talking about inspired. So the aggravating foods that are associated with Vata are going to be the foods that have those light, dry, and cool qualities. So our bitter and our astringent and our raw and cold and our pungent foods are going to have those qualities of light.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and some of them will have the dry quality as well, astringent for sure, right? Like for those folks who don't know astringent, it's basically anything you put on your tongue where you feel like you need to drink something afterwards or have oil. So could you imagine having a baked potato with no butter or salt on it?
Oh yeah, the nightshades. Yeah, the white potato. Yeah.
Yeah, and popcorn with no butter and salt, or cranberries. Think about those cinnamon, right? There's things that you can think of, or an astringent banana. You need to grab something to drink after you have these. So these are your astringent types foods, and more on foods in one of our other sessions. And then our lifestyle choices, our entrepreneur, arts, creative, big ideas, all of the things that are associated with our beautiful Vata baby. Pitta in the middle. So they're always, right down the middle. They've got, a moderate sort of middle range body. All of the things about Pitta are right down the middle. A Vata person might be tall and a Kapha person might be larger, but Pitta's right in the middle. It's
like a cheetah, whereas the Vata is like a willowy kind of how do you say it, like a heron kind of thing, and then the Kapha is like a bear.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, I think if I were to compare animals, I would go with a hummingbird.
A hummingbird for Vata.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the cheetah is a really great option. And then your cheetahs, they've got that gaze, that sharp gaze. They know what they want. They only use as much energy as they need because they use energy to run, and then their muscles relax. If you watch them run, it's just an absolutely beautiful visualization of efficiency. And then, our mama bear, right? I love the idea of that bear qualities of our Kapha.
And I guess if a pitta becomes imbalanced, they can put on weight, become heavier, kind of become like that overweight cheetah that's now looking a little bit more like a bear, feeling kind of dense and heavy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And even our bear can start accumulating excess vata and feel anxious. And then we've got, an anxious bear not knowing how to find it funny.
Oh no, not an anxious bear.
All right, so our pitta, we've got our passionate leader, reliable, hardworking, and then sharp, controlling, that spreading sort of quality. Not only do they spread, our physical diseases, but our pitta people want to spread their name and fame. So there's that sort of quality as well. Brave, focused, but also on the other side can be frustrated, jealous, anger. Our spicy foods, fermented foods, salty, sour, and then our lifestyle. So they're usually the excess pitta will cause gray hair and glasses. So, all of our older sort of engineers and doctors, how you can just, you're picturing them and they've got the gray hair, balding, glasses, these are our highly pitta folks. Those are some imbalances that happen for our pitta folks. Unfortunately, they're prone to gray hair and balding and glasses. So it's just a thing.
And I find it really interesting because you see here fermented, right? And like fermented is considered to be like a healthy food, right? For your microbiome, to feed your microbiome, those fermented products like sauerkraut, fermented sweet potato. You can ferment everything, right?
Mhm.
But what I see here is that you can overdo a good thing.
Mhm.
And depending on your constitution, you might be more prone to overdoing a good thing. And I personally remember when I used to have my salad with like a huge amount of sauerkraut. And one of the things I did was really dial back, like first of all, no sauerkraut for a while, and then when I reintroduced it, just like a little bit. And so when I read that list, it's just very interesting to see, like, just because something is good for you, don't overdo it. There's still that Goldilocks zone.
And it depends on your constitution and your current imbalance. So someone who is, on the kapha imbalance side, who might have a little bit of weight gain or might have lymphatic congestion, they will do well with these fermented foods to help stimulate their digestion and help them get up and moving and accomplish things. Whereas someone who might already have an itis or, a rash or inflammation, or is dealing with some jealousy that they recognize or frustration, that fermented food overdose may further aggravate their symptoms.
So fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Our kapha, now that we're talking about our mama bear, so our heavy, moist, oily, cool, nurturing, grounded, can also be thick and dense, static, immobile, good memory. They're the folks that are gonna be like, oh yeah, I remember you said this. It was a Tuesday, it was raining, you were wearing that purple shirt I really like. Like, where do they remember all of those things? These are the folks that have that good memory. Compassionate, loving, joyful, but too much in excess, any of us can have excess kapha and get to the depressed, lethargic, sort of sad emotions. And so, poor kapha, because the aggravating foods are all the fun ones, your sweet, sour, and salty. So they're the ones that are going to increase the building in the body, your sweet foods, whether they're rice or wheat or sweet potatoes, all of those thick, heavy, dense sort of sweet tastes that are helpful for building our body are also in excess going to maybe imbalance our kapha baby, but not our vata baby, so they'll need the sweet, sour, and salty foods.
Very important to know.
Yeah, and in addition, the cold, thick, and slimy. So those folks who are sitting on the couch, binge watching their TV and having ice cream and pizza are right in that line of getting a kapha imbalance. And they might wonder, why am I feeling so tired when I wake up? Why am I so lethargic? Why can't I just get up and accomplish my things? And it might have something to do with excess kapha from your habits.
That makes so much sense. Wow, incredible.
And our lifestyle. So like I said, they can sit sedentary for long periods of time. There are worker bees, our laborers, our care providers, they're, love outdoors. And also they might be your gamers that are in the basement playing games for hours on end and just loving it.
I know I can see that with children. Like my son is like definitely like a Kapha Pitta, but I have to purposely get him to play outside because he will go to like gaming or television watching like nobody's business. And I can see the imbalance that causes in him.
Hmm.
And Ursula has a question here. Would you say that we crave these foods that match our constitution but aggravate the imbalance? And if we're going to answer that in a future slide, which I think we will, we can save it for later. Or what do you think, Natasha?
Yeah, I would say that that's a great question, and we are going to touch on it very soon.
Oh, good. Good question.
Great. So what are our imbalances here? I don't know what happened with that. Okay, so some of the imbalances, so we alluded to this. So when we're looking at Vata, our Vata imbalance, what are the ways that it can manifest in the body? So what is our body telling us? What is the language of our body that's saying like, hey, you might want to take a look at your habits and your diet and your lifestyle and your environment and notice if you see the excess dry light qualities anywhere, because this is what your body's saying you have too much of. And it's telling you this when you see the dry skin, nails, constipation, poor circulation, weakness of muscles, spasms that you might have, cracking joints. And then as it elevates, then we will start to get the more serious imbalances.
Yeah, I mean, osteoporosis is super interesting. And then the Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, like the drying out of the tissues, like osteoporosis is definitely like a brittle bone that's caused from a drying out of the tissues, like a loss of like that fat inside the bone and all the minerals, which is super interesting. And Alzheimer's, like if you do MRIs of Alzheimer's, their brain actually shrinks. And Parkinson's too, like they lose tissue and there's more air around there. So that's um, incredibly interesting because in Dr. Dale Bredesen, who is one of the leading researchers in Alzheimer's in the US, he actually published a paper speaking about Ayurveda and Alzheimer's, and he linked the Vata dosha imbalance. So your Vata who imbalances Vata, Pitta who imbalances Pitta, and Kapha who imbalances, Pitta who imbalances Vata, and Kapha who imbalances Vata. So the imbalance is the Vata. And he actually, in that paper, describes like how he puts into the categories of how all these different treatments, including nutrition and herbs, can be tailored, personalized according to the constitution that you started with, and then the imbalance of Vata that you develop. And so it's really cool when the leading scientific researcher who wrote the book The End of Alzheimer's, which is amazing. And we'll do a workshop one day just on Alzheimer's for those who have a family history or concern, or family friends who have a history or concern. I love that. That's like a really beautiful example of the intersection of cutting edge wisdom and ancient science.
Yeah, I love that. And when we both, Patricia shared the article with me, and I just loved reading it because it really comes down to the basics. If you understand what's going on with Alzheimer's, the dryness, the shrinking, it's associated with the dry and light quality. The opposite of dry is oily, and the opposite of light is heavy, and the opposite of cool is warm. And a lot of the ideas that were offered in the article had to do with oily, heavy, and warm.
Yeah.
And, like get more oil in your diet, get oil on the body, get oil, like oil enemas and these types of sort of heavier types foods and warming foods. Stay warm, get cozy, put your socks on, get a blanket while you're on the, he wasn't saying these things, but like, this is me. Get a blanket while you're on the couch, and just keep yourself warm and cozy. Like these are the things that, our Vata person might not reach for. They're going to get on the couch and get their iced coffee drink a lot of time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll talk about why that is actually in a few moments, which is also going to help answer Ursula's question. All right, so we've got Pitta next, and with Pitta, we're talking about that hot, light, sharp, oily, spreading sort of qualities, and we start to see them in our body language with rashes, acne, dizziness. It's a big one. Often people complain of dizziness and they're not quite sure what's going on. Irritability, nail infections, and then our hot flashes as well. So on the more kind of serious side, we're looking at anemia and anything that has an itis, which is inflammation. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. So that inflammation in the body is excess heat, and that excess heat also starts to spread.
Yeah, I see here, it can be inflammation of the tendons, which can be localized, like one side of the body or throughout the body. Colitis is the gut, so inflammation of the gut. Arthritis is the joint. Prostatitis, the prostate. Endometriosis, like the lining of the endometrium, the uterus, right? And then you can get the whole body inflammation, which downstream will eventually lead to things like cancer, diabetes, heart attacks, strokes. So this is a big one. And personally, like, the way that I presented a lot was the rash. And so I find that very fascinating. And probably if I didn't fix my imbalance, I would one day going through menopause have a lot of issues with hot flashes, right? So some of these are like dependent on your stage of life. So if you're like in your teens versus your 20s versus your 60s, you're going to have different things of these manifesting, right? You're not going to necessarily get a hot flash when you're in your teenage years. That would be something down the road. However, you can certainly get inflammation of different body parts. And I always say, like, for someone who has like a inflamed neck or an inflamed tendon, like forearm, or plantar fasciitis, yeah, it's one part of your body that's inflamed. But if your body inflammation is inflamed, it's like turning up the volume, right? And it'll make that locally inflamed area even more painful.
And I'm glad you brought up the different stages of life, because also each stage of our life is associated with a dosha. So we have our like kapha stage of life when we're born and we got lots of mucus and we're a little bit chubby, and then we've got our pitta stage of life when we're hit puberty through to menopause, where we're accomplishing goals and collecting things and getting a house and getting married and like getting a job and getting our education and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have our vata time of life, which can be a time of like dryness for most people.
Mm.
And the time that if we're not paying attention during our pitta time of life, we're accumulating all this excess heat right around menopause is when these imbalances really start to show up in a big way, because we've just compacted all of this heat and now we're going into the dry part of our life, like when we were talking about before with like what happens actually in menopause and that sort of like new employee that shows up, right? And so in the pitta time of life, we will get those rashes, we get the acne, we get the dizziness, the irritability, and some infections. And sometimes we do start with itises, but right around that age is when, if we were accumulating all this excess fire from our exercising and like still working at 110% on the first 3 days of our flow, and like exercising every week and pushing and trying to achieve and not resting, that's all fire element. And then yes, you set yourself up for those hot flashes and all of the things that happen in the next stage of life.
I just had an aha moment where pitta is mostly closely related to cortisol hormone. And then kapha seems to be more closely related to the insulin hormone, which is like the sugar relative. And I'm trying to think of what vata might be. So give me a moment on that one. But that's really interesting, because all of those things like hot flashes and itises, when you're like mismanaging your cortisol hormone, cortisone is the medication that they often give to help inflammation. And cortisone is the breakdown product of cortisol. So you're basically imbalancing your stress hormone cortisol. And what you described are all those habits that will increase your stress level, right? So how wonderful that Ayurveda had a way of like seeing that, but because they didn't have the blood test, they didn't know that there was this hormone related to it, but they could see that there was this pattern of imbalance related to these lifestyle and dietary and habits and mental mindset kind of ways of living that led to these conditions. And the science definitely shows that. It's kind of, oh, wow, mind-blowing.
And I love that they keep it simple. Like if you really think about it, it's like, what am I doing? Do these have the qualities of like sharp and light and hot and like, mobile? And if I'm doing too much of this, and then my imbalance also matches that, it's like a really nice way to like bring it down to a place that's like accessible without knowing all of the science that's been backing it up, but like someone just, someone just regular can start to make those connections.
Totally.
Yeah, I love them. All right, so onto our kapha, those cool, heavy, dense, oily sort of qualities are going to be associated with, you guessed it, like congestion, both lymphatic and in the lungs, weight gain, high cholesterol, joint stiffness, impacted wisdom teeth, and depression. And then we, not checked is going to, get into these more intense sort of imbalances, where you can actually start to see from the list there, the qualities of these imbalances are also the qualities of our earth and water element.
That was, yeah, like tumor is very dense. Leukemia is a tumor of the bone marrow, basically. Diabetes is a disease from too much sugar. Remember, you said sweet is like an imbalance of sugar, so that's like a sugar kind of fast carbs. Enlarged prostate is also testosterone hormonal imbalances from those kinds of dietaries, and so heavy menstrual flow as well has to do a lot with the hormonal imbalances that you can get into through those dietary fast carbs, insulin, then dysregulating. So, wow, yeah, it all makes sense.
Fascinating stuff. So to answer Ursula's question, here we're talking about what happens and how we go from healthy to a state of imbalance. And so in Ayurveda, we talk about 6 stages of disease. And the stages start in the digestive tract, where our humors sit. So our Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, our air, bile, and mucus and phlegm, they sit in the digestive tract. That's their seat. That's where they're happy. That's their home. They like to be there. And then what happens is we start to accumulate excess dosha with our choices. So I'm going to pick on Vata for now because we are in the fall. And so let's just say that we're in alignment and we're going into the fall season, and we've decided to continually eat our dry, crunchy, rough types of foods. And so we're going to start to notice just in the digestive tract what that's going to start to affect. So we might have gas, we might have constipation. Remember, gas, air element, constipation, dry. So we're starting to see these little sort of minor imbalances in the digestive tract. We're still in the first stages of disease here. And when that starts to happen to us, we might start to think like, okay, well, you know what? I really need to just take a day off, or I really feel like having stew for some reason, or, I'm not going to have my sweet sort of waffle breakfast and I'm going to have my, eggs or, these other sort of tastes for my breakfast. And you just start to make these changes automatically. And in the fall, nature gives us the antidote, which is just wonderful, right? Like what's available in the fall are like our roots and potatoes and sweet potato and carrots and like all of these things that are going to start to pacify this vata is like growing out of the ground and falling off the trees. And so nature's just like, here, eat this stuff and get into balance, but let's say we don't listen. Let's say we don't listen and it's the fall and school's starting and, there's all of these after school activities, and then you want to get on top of like, your own extracurricular activities, and you start meeting up with people, or maybe you move or you change jobs, or, all of this movement and mobile qualities, and you're still eating your dry, crunchy foods, and you're having your iced drinks still, and you're accumulating more vata dosha. So it starts to fill up, and there's not much more room left in the house. It filled all the beds. There's nowhere, air mattresses on the floor. There's nowhere else for Vata to sleep. And they're like, you got to get out of here. So they start to leave the house, and they go around and look in the neighborhood to see if there's any open doors, unlocked windows, to see if they can just go nest somewhere else. And what's happening is excess vata leaves the digestive tract and then travels into the body to find the weak tissue. And when it does find that open door or cracked window, it starts to go in and make a new home there, which then disrupts the tissue. And it starts to say, hey guys, I found a great new place. Come on over here. And as we continue to add Vata with our choices of diet and lifestyle and environment, we accumulate more and it fills the other house and it starts to accumulate there, really disrupting the tissue and then turning and manifesting into an imbalance. And then only when it gets to a place of like overload is when Western science says, oh, I can diagnose this. This is osteoporosis.
Oh, I see. So what I'm hearing is that people, like various different people, can have a Vata imbalance depending on your genetics. The weak link of your chain will be, for some people, it might be the bone. For some people, it might be the brain. For some people, it might be both. And so one thing will like present first, and there's these progression, like stages along the way where that disorder is accumulating. And if you can understand your body language, you can see that it's progressing, and blood work and things that your doctor does in your annual checkup might not actually detect any issue. And when you explain the body language to them, they're just going to be like, oh, I don't know, like, have why don't you go buy some lotion at the store for your dry skin or whatever, right? And then but if you don't correct it, it keeps going. And then it gets so bad that now the blood work or the imaging or the DEXA scan for your osteoporosis screening will show you that you have this full on condition now. And it's like, you missed out on this massive opportunity to create change, to reverse it. And when we were like reviewing this, you mentioned that at some point it's your body is giving you cues of how to correct itself, but there's a tipping point, you mentioned, at which point the body becomes so imbalanced that it actually starts to crave the things that make it worse.
Yeah, that's right. And so around stage 3, so in the first couple stages of disease, you're noticing things in the digestive tract. So like we talked about, picking on Vata, the gas or the constipation, and then it leaves. And so then you might be noticing the dry skin or the dry hair. But you're like Patricia's saying, I'm just going to buy some lotion. I'm going to get some conditioner. No big deal. I'm going to keep accumulating excess Vata and just not pay attention to the body language signs. And then what happens around stage 3 is where it spreads and found the new house. Stage 3, between stage 3 and stage 4. And when it finds the new house and it's like, oh, we got new digs over here, that's when your mind starts to change. So at first, when there's accumulation and there's no more room in your house, you're like, wow, I need to do something about all the people I have in my house right now, And so at that point, you start to crave the opposite. And so you want to balance yourself out. But then when it gets too much and overflows and they found a new place to go, your mind starts to crave to bring more Vata because your tissue has been deranged. And now Vata is in control over there, and it's asking you to do more things to bring more friends to the new house. And so that's right between stage 3 and stage 4, where you start to crave the opposite. So when we're looking at the question, like, are you trying to look at your constitution and balance based on your constitution? Or are you trying to balance based on your imbalance? We have a constitution. We might be a Pitta person, as an example. But we might be having these habits associated with excess Vata. And it may not be under our control, or maybe, we have a job that makes us fly back and forth all the time, or we're on the go. And then we have like lots of busyness in our life and we're accumulating lots of excess Vata. So just because we're a Pitta person, if we're not having a Pitta imbalance, like if we're not noticing that we're really irritated and getting, inflammation and all the things, but we're a Pitta person and we're starting to notice that we're getting constipation and we might be fainting and we've got dry skin and like all the things, then we've got a Vata imbalance. And that's what you want to look at. You want to really focus on balancing Vata back, keeping in mind Pitta, because some of the qualities are alike. So you want to balance Vata back. And you want to focus on that at the time, because this is something we're looking at on a daily basis. We're not just deciding like, oh, I'm Pitta and I've got a Vata imbalance and I'm going to be doing Vata balancing things to just pacify this for like the rest of my life. And this is my new diet. This is not how it works. It's going to change as the season changes. It's going to change as our environment changes, as our mind changes, as our diet changes. All of these things are going to affect what imbalance that we're feeling at the time. So it's really about that body language and listening to the body and listening to our intuition and really developing that.
Well, that was amazing because it brings up a few points in my mind that intuitive eating might work up to a certain point, and then after that, you kind of have to stop listening to your intuition because it might now be deranged by your imbalance, and you have to actually take a step back and look at it from a big eye view, and you may need to have some assistance with an Ayurveda practitioner or a functional medicine doctor or naturopathic person who has this kind of understanding, depending on what stage you're at, right? And there's a question that came up: do we eat based on the season or based on our imbalance? We're going to speaking about nutrition next week for a very specific reason, because this is a big topic. And so that was a perfect intro to the slide. Next week, we're going to be talking about nutrition because when you're speaking of nutrition, you're thinking about eating for your imbalance, eating for the season, eating for the time of day, eating for your current health condition, eating for your future health goals, eating for hormonal balance, eating for nutrient density, eating to not expose yourself to toxins and processed foods, right? The nice thing is that what you'll learn next week, what you'll learn with the next course, the next module in this course, which is the nutrition for fall, is how to put that all together. And you'll see that it can feel very complicated, but it can also become very simple. And so it's really exciting to know that this will be coming up, and it's the next module in this course, because it's not a one kind of slide answer. It's going to require the same attention to detail that we put into this workshop today. And I love this proverb: when diet is wrong, medicine of no use. When diet is right, medicine is of no need. I'll caveat that to say, depending on which stage you're at, that Natasha showed, you might need something to bridge, like to give yourself, like you might be in stage 6, and you might need a little bit of medicine to support you to get back to stage 1 and before. And then when you get your balance back, then I would say that medicine is of no need. But for some people, you do need a course of targeted supplements, or sometimes a prescription medication. If you're like so depressed or you're so tired that you literally can't get yourself off the floor to even cook a meal or bring it to your door meal service, right? Then there is a role for this. This Ayurvedic proverb is speaking to health prevention and promotion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And nutrition is such a fun and expansive topic in Ayurveda. And what we love about this is that a lot of times it has to do with like when you're eating,
Mm-hmm.
how
Yeah.
you're eating, and your state of mind while eating.
Oh my
And
goodness, so true.
yeah, and what are you gonna digest, assimilate, and absorb? A lot of us are focused on counting calories, or making sure we've got our vegetables. And I see here, like, do we need a dosha balanced meal? Do we need all 6 tastes that we're talking about in the meal? We're gonna talk a lot about this, in our next session. But just to give you a little information on it now, it depends, and it's frustrating, that in Ayurveda it depends. But knowing these fundamentals are really helpful for making those choices. So yes, is it great to have all 6 tastes, but how much of each taste? Well, that depends on your current imbalance. And so you can make this beautiful meal of a basic thing for your whole family, and then change the spices or the herbs or the condiments associated, or the amounts of each food, depending on your family's needs. If someone like Patricia's son is more Kapha Pitta, and she's having a meal with sweet potato, then he might have a little less sweet potato, and maybe her husband might have a little more sweet potato, or her other son, depending on their imbalance or constitution. And that can really help move things forward. So we're going to be talking about this and so much more in the next session.
I wanted to serve this slide as a reminder that There's things from the outside in that you can do and things from the inside out that you can do. And when you listen to this, I just wanted to make sure you got the message that, let's say you're experiencing something like dry skin or a rash, right? Certainly Ayurveda has a lot of wonderful techniques that help you deal with the dry skin from the outside in. So the oils, and that kind of thing, like castor oil for a rash or sesame oil for just general nourishing hydration. However, if you're only dealing with it from the outside in, you're missing like 95% of what needs to be done from the inside out, because it's still kind of like a band-aid in a way. Yes, you are nourishing your skin and that food does get into your body. But if your digestive tract, for example, continues to be imbalanced, you're still going to get that inside out erosion, ongoing erosion of your health. And so it is important to just to be mindful of that necessary attention to the inside out approach. And that's why this workshop series includes the nutrition, the routines, which is how to eat, when to exercise, all those kinds of things, and sleeping, not just sleeping, but when to sleep. And so all of those things will be addressed as a necessary piece of the whole puzzle.
And working towards finding what your root cause is. This also reminds me of like, yeah, okay, I've got dry skin, I've got dry hair, and these are some wonderful gifts from Ayurveda about the Abhyanga self-oil massage that can really help nourish you as well from the outside in. But what is the root cause of the excess vata? Is it your anxiety? Is it your food choices? This is the idea that we really want you to take home is you need to take time to really think about your whole life holistically and notice, what is it that I'm doing that might have these qualities in it, whether it's your environment or your thought process or your food or your habits. And through these 4 sessions, we're going to give you lots of tools to choose from to be like, okay, is it my routine? Is it my sleep pattern? Is it my diet? What is it that's the root cause of these imbalances? And then once you know what the root cause is, then you can really work on it. We were talking about the 6 stages of disease, and like sometimes, yeah, you need herbs, supplements, etc., to bring you down from one of the higher stages to the lower stage so that you can use your intuition again. But when you do this, when you start to come down to your root cause, then you're not going to accumulate more. And without knowing the root cause, then you can bring yourself down with these herbs and topical remedies, but you're going to bring yourself back up. And so what we really want to do is get you to understand the fundamentals. And then we're going to pick on different aspects of your life to see if we can help you find the root cause.
That's so wonderful. It's so exciting and so empowering. And I just want to point out, there's a question by Ursula. Is the goal then to have a good balance between the 3 doshas with your food, or only adjust if an imbalance is observed?
I would say that it's both.
That makes sense, because you have to be paying attention to your imbalances and adjusting your food for the imbalance that you're observing. And it's never good to have too much of one thing. So you never want too much of a fiery. You don't want too much of watery. You don't want too much of cold and slimy. So you're going to be putting like amounts. And then what you're going to learn next week is the seasonal aspect of it. And Natasha today touched on how what your constitution is, which the best approximation I can gather is from looking back to when you were best balanced, to see like what is your foundational constitution. And once you correct for your imbalance, then you're going to be eating with a particular eye to your foundational constitution, which is the concept of personalized medicine, personalized nutrition. It doesn't make sense to give the same recipes to every single person who comes your way, even if those recipes are super healthy and delicious, because that person's going to have their inherent constitution in addition to perhaps an imbalance on top of that. So I agree with Natasha when she says you basically have to eat based on the season, based on the imbalance, and based on your original constitution, and not so much I need to have the 3 doshas balanced on my plate so to speak, but more like, what is my constitution? What's my imbalance? And what's the time of year? What's the time of day? That kind of thing. Would you say that's right, Natasha?
Yeah, absolutely. And the most beautiful and frustrating thing about it, especially for our Pitta folks, is there aren't rules to follow. You know, our Pitta folks, they're like, tell me all of the rules so that I know how to follow them and I know how to break them and I know how to fix things. You know, and that is the beautiful part about Ayurveda, is because it is about, you know, nourishing that intuition and listening to the body and just understanding where you are and what you need today, and also making it playful and not stressful. You know, like if you are experiencing an imbalance, and let's just say, since we're picking on Vata, it's anxiety. You know, let's say that you do have this forgetfulness and anxiety and worry and forgetful and like all of these things in the spinning hamster wheel mind. You know, if that is your predominant thing that's happening, you know, just take a look, like, you know, how much raw crunchy foods are you having? How much are you moving around? Like one person, one of my clients was like working in a restaurant, which is very mobile, and saving money to go travel when she was not working. So she'd like work in a restaurant where you're talking and moving and all of the things, and then pause and then travel the world. And doing this for years was just like accumulating excess vata. And she was really a type of person who liked to like work out a lot. And so there was like so much movement, and the diet was also excess vata. So she had all of these ways that in her life that she was accumulating excess vata, and didn't understand why she had such a severe you know, story and anxiety and limited beliefs in her mind, and how her mind was just so playing against her. But it was a slow accumulation over years of this vata imbalance in that tissue.
Ah, wow, that makes so much sense. Wow.
Yeah. And so it starts with routine. So when she started to implement a routine in her life, things started to calm down. And she was always cognizant of food choices, but the routine did it. The routine, not having any routine, was really one of her root causes.
I'm so glad we're going to be doing a whole session just on routines, because I hear that coming up a lot. And I think that's really, really key.
Yeah, me too. Love it. All right. So this is the sort of final, we're coming to the end here of our presentation. We really hope that you understand Ayurveda a little bit more. We hope that you really get that it's really about figuring out the qualities of what's going on in front of you, associating that with an element or a dosha, and then understanding the opposite can really help pacify that. And we're going to help you even more with the next following sessions. And we're very excited to continue to go on this journey with you. We have a few questions for you. And so the first question, and we'd love for you to write them in the chat if you'd like. What's something that surprised you about today, and what will you take away? And what imbalances can you identify currently in yourself, maybe?
Okay. And I see Jan can see that she has a Kapha imbalance. Yes. Yes. I know that's a very common one I find these days for sure. Yeah. And is that you, Natasha, Kapha?
Yeah, sometimes I wonder how a bag of cheesies got in my garbage can.
Yeah, right.
Like, I opened up the garbage can and I'm like, how did that get in there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And Ursula is saying almost 100% pitta and have some work to do. That's very interesting. Yeah. And I would say personally, I'm pitta and vata. I used to have some kapha imbalance as well, but I worked that out of my system. And now I feel like my vata is getting a little bit better, but I have some residual of that in the pitta as well. And I'm just love how, you know, it's a never ending process of learning. Like you know, it's never done. You know, it's like I'm always learning, and I love it. I love this process of inquiry and learning from here, learning from there, and then getting these threads of truth, as I call them, the essence of health, and seeing where they all kind of interconnect. And I find that Ayurveda just has so many threads of truth running through it. And I'm really excited for you ladies who have signed up for this, because it is incredibly empowering when you start to see. And it sometimes it takes a lot of change for a long period of time, and sometimes it takes like a little bit of change for a short period of time for you to see the differences, you know. So I just invite you to be excited. You know, any sense of overwhelm that you have, just let it go. That's like the anxiousness, you know, that Vata imbalance. Let it go, and just sit in the knowledge that you did the right thing. You are invested in your health. You invested in this experience, and you're going to get really good health information out of this that you're going to be able, as Natasha said at the very beginning, immediately apply to yourself. And there's probably within, you know, for the next few days, just look at what you're eating, just observe, don't judge. It's not judgment, it's observation and then action, right? And you know, when you start to tie emotional responses to things like, but I love this food, you know, I love the taste in my mouth. Remember that stage 4, 5, 6 of the disease, you know, that intuition may no longer serve you. So you might have to actually just take a really rational step backwards and just take a look at what you're doing. And is there anything that surprised you in this session? I always love surprises. So think to yourself, was there something that surprised you? And for me, when I first saw this, the surprise was something like the fermented foods potentially being bad, you know, imbalancing when we hear that they're so good for you. And there actually is, and please, while I'm speaking, feel free to put that into the chat. There is a thing called histamine intolerance, where people eat things that are fermented and they actually like flush or get a headache right away. And it's really tough because you can also get that with leftover foods. Like if you have a food that's not like a day, 2 or 3 days old, some people cannot tolerate that. And you're like, oh my goodness, like now I have to make fresh food every day. And the thing is, sometimes we get so imbalanced that that's what you need to do for a period of time, right? So that's something that I found was surprising for me.
For me, when I look back on my life and when kombucha started to be a thing,
Oh yeah.
everyone was like, kombucha is like the best, blah, blah, blah. And so like I like got on the kombucha train, and I even like had my own SCOBY, and I like was making kombucha and I was drinking it, and I had no idea. I had so much acne on my face at that time. And I was like, it's supposed to be really great for you. Like, you know, and I'm sure it was to some extent, but it was too much for
Mm.
me. And my acne was like really overwhelming at the time when I was like creating my own and drinking my own kombucha. So it was really interesting, is that like, you know, fermentation and excess heat.
Wow, what a cool insight.
Mhm.
Yeah, and some kombuchas don't have their sugars fermented enough, so you can have a lot of sugar. Then you
Yeah,
can have a kapha imbalance with that one.
absolutely. Yeah.
So we wanted to take an opportunity now to say thank you so much. Your time is the most precious commodity that you have. Thank you for spending it with us. We are so grateful. We've been so excited to do this course for women like you who are super interested and invested in your health. You know, we need more thriving, vibrant, vivacious, grounded, calming, peaceful, loving, you know, creative women out there. And so, you know, and share this wisdom with whoever you want. You know, it's really exciting times, and we look forward to seeing you in our future sessions. And feel free to ask if there's any questions that come up. Please email them to us so we can create, you know, some answers for you, or at least have them in mind when we're heading into our next session. Okay. So hope you have a really wonderful day, evening, or night, depending on when and where you're catching this from. And we look forward to seeing you next time.